Thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks everyone for jumping on the line. We're going to have a really fun conversation right now about disruption and innovation for big brands. So I'm super excited about that. And I just want to encourage you all to pop in your questions in the chat. I'm going to try to do my best to multitask, and I've got some questions to ask you, David, but I want this to be as interactive as possible. So please engage and let us know if you have any questions. So as I said, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
I'm very grateful. It's a great follow-up conversation that we had a couple months ago. So happy to be here and excited to share and just engage.
Absolutely. So maybe just to kick off, can you tell us a little bit of background about Bionic and the work that you guys do and your kind of philosophy around disruptive innovation?
Yeah, happy to do that. So we started Bionic about 8 years ago. We're about 55, 60 people now, 25 million in revenue, bootstrap startup in a way. I guess we're kind of beyond a startup at this point. This is my fourth company. I've had three venture-backed SaaS companies, and I've been writing books about mindset and sort of like how to bet your life as a founder. And as it turns out, what we discovered in this journey is that large organizations have largely eradicated the skill of growth. Their big to bigger engine, right, is designed specifically for efficiency and optimization of what exists. And that's planning, right? And we have advanced degrees for administration, right, to do that job really well. And it's very important. But it's gotten so overbuilt and incentivized to be so short term that trying to do new things inside that big to bigger is really at war with its purpose, right? It's there to defeat risk. And so there's a huge distinction between planning and discovery. And so when you think about what's the form of management that exists that does discovery or growth, it actually exists. It's been around for 30 years, and that's venture capital and entrepreneurship and their skill. And the good news is, while you don't have to be in the unicorn business so much, but you can be in the growth business, large organizations can restore this muscle. And what Bionic does is come with the talent, the people, a model we call the Growth OS that restores this capability at the top. And so we've been doing this now for 8 years, about 40 companies, directly with the CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world, Citigroup, P&G, General Mills, Microsoft, Nike, who've all taken what has been really a conservative approach to markets and now put the whole companies on offense. And they're very good at it now. So it's at scale. So happy to jump in and talk about both the mindset and the systems that do that work. But it's been a great journey and a reward to do this because in a way, these companies are almost refounding themselves. And that's exciting.
That's really interesting. And the piece that you said about these sort of short-sighted kind of mindsets or whatever is kind of interesting because it seems like a lot of these bigger companies have a difficult time innovating quickly. So how does that add up to each other, I guess?
Well, you always get what you pay for. And so, there's, philosophically speaking, I think we've gone from shareholder now hopefully back to stakeholder values, which the Business Roundtable is pushing on. But largely, this is a phenomenon of the last sort of like 30, 40 years. I wrote a book with Christina Wallace, a professor at Harvard this last year called New to Big, which describes sort of like the 1.0 of this. And if you send me an email at david@onbionic.com. I'll send you the book. But it's a great sort of like understanding of corporations really were designed for like community. They're designed for their teams and the customer, the community in its origination. And then we move to the incentives of the shareholder view of the world. And that led to short-termism, and it lost the value of the employee. It lost the role of the customer, the people, so to speak, in the world that mattered, that were really hung on the value the company was creating in the world. And so when that switch happened and all the incentives, you got, CEO paid disruption or dislocation in this context. And we lost, any incentive to take care of the future or capture it. And so the breaking out of that is that we've sort of like large organizations that are still completely designed to win the quarter, not the future, are now kind of eating their bones, right? There's nothing left. As a result of this other ecosystem where growth mindset and growth systems live after 20, 30 years is now not just, a bunch of toys out there. They're actually designed to defeat those companies. They're not for sale. They're designed to create those new companies, both public and private. And that's the intention. And so you can't just wait anymore and then decide to acquire into a space, because what you'll end up with is sort of the suboptimal asset, sort of like second or third in line. And what I've done about almost 50 angel investments over the last 15 years, is that two mediocre companies doesn't make a great company. The company itself has to become great. And that's really what our purpose is to really ignite growth revolutions. That's actually the line in the organizations. And I used to think about that as a question about like money and performance. It was economic. But the truth is that's really that's the interior life of the leader. That growth revolution really is a direct reflection of their energy in the company, their permission. And that ceiling, whether it be high or low, is always the direct reflection of the mindset of the leadership team. So if the permission doesn't exist, they can't do it. And so our job is to build the systems they can trust, so we can raise the permission so they can install the mindset and the systems to go on offense, not as an initiative, but permanently. It's a complete restoration of discovery as a capability. I'll say this last thing and then we could keep going. Jen, is that I rarely use the word innovation. And the reason why is because there's just so much brain damage around it. And it's really like a toy, right? We're about growth, urgency, getting the whole company back on offense. And when it happens, it's not a function. It's not like we're going to launch 100 things that never die. It's really about building a machine that's literally permanently on offense, that's producing that every single year, like clockwork, like clockwork. So that's really what we're after. And we've done it successfully now for the last couple of years.
That's incredible. I want to like dig a lot deeper on that growth mindset
Go
because
for it.
like I mean, that seems like a huge undertaking to try to get like, some of the brands you mentioned that you guys work with, like Nike or Microsoft, like a brand of that size to get them to shift from one strategy to another, one mindset to another. Like, what are, I guess, what are some of the strategies that these companies can leverage to get into that growth mindset and, maintain their competitive advantage, get that growth, not innovation that you're talking about?
Well, I think there's a realization that they have systems that are designed for operating the business really well, right? We have, TQM, and we have lean manufacturing and Six Sigma. We have systems that are designed to create efficiency and optimization. And the question is like, do we have a system that creates growth? And it's really shocking because the answer is no, we don't. We have projects and we have innovation. We think it's everywhere. The truth is, it's not systematically done. It's been eradicated, which is sort of shocking. I mean, 30 years ago, if you said, "Hey, we could take this product and make it global," there'd be all sorts of complexity and friction around that, right? Today, all that friction has been eradicated. Like we have the systems, we have the efficiency, we have the models, so we can take something local and take it global. We can operate at will. And so the question is why can we not grow at well? Why can't we, in the same way it was unimaginable 30 years ago to operate at will, today we can do it like clockwork? It's a skill. Why can't we do that for growth? And so when you think about why that is the case, it's that we have really fundamentally, we have a view of the world and mindset. So I'll drop some like mindset ideas. So if you've never read Carol Dweck's work about growth mindset, is really about static versus active. And static mindsets believe that things stay consistent and they're true. Growth mindset is that you actually have the ability to consider all solutions and move into the ones that are actually true. And I think this is a really big question, which is, do these organizations, in their desire for growth, do they tell the truth? And so fundamentally underneath all this work is really is the organization in a position to tell the truth? Can leadership and teams actually speak the truth? Or is the cost of failure so high that
Mm.
everyone is running around intellectually dishonest? And I tell you, as an investor, like you never invest in an entrepreneur who loves their idea ever. You want them obsessed with the need, with total permission to solve it. That's the opposite in a large company where we make 5 big $50 million bets a year that some big genius consulting firm tells us to do. And the reality is that, those ideas never die. They're basically a zombie factory. And the problem with this is, just to come full circle, and I'll share some of the mindset lenses in a second, is that when you go back and you look at the value of where growth comes from, about 70% of all the money you ever make in growth comes from 7% of the capital you deploy. So whether it be $100 million or $10, doesn't matter, or it's 100 ideas or seven out of the 100, 7% of capital is going to be all of your unbounded returns. Okay. So the question is, if you're a good manager, you're going to say, well, why don't we just make more of those decisions, right? Invest in more of the seven. And the answer is you can't, because the 93 teach you the seven. The question is how much money do we burn to find the seven or the 7%? But more importantly is when you go back to the beginning and say, well, why did we invest in those seven? They have two signals. One is high conviction, the question of why us? Proprietary gift meets timing, outside force. So it's not your balance sheet, your brand, and your money. It's because it's happening to you and you have a gift to solve it. That's the first signal. The second signal is non-consensus. You make all of your money with the ideas with the highest disagreement rate in the beginning. So let that sink in. Basically, if you have consensus and you're going for growth, you're basically screwed. How do you hold a mindset in portfolio that allows you to actually be taught the answers as opposed to knowing? This is your huge, major mental models that need to be moved. And so what we do is we build a system that they can trust so they can do that. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but this is really where it comes down to is how you think, the lenses you view the world through is really where it begins.
Mm. That's so interesting about the 7% and the 93%. And it ties in really to what you were saying before about being like that permission to fail. Like you have to have those 93 failures or whatever, however you want to define them to get to the seven. So if everything is so high risk that, it's got to be a success, then you're just ending up with sort of a mediocre performance overall.
I think this is true about our careers too. I think you want every company to work, and you have to have absolute conviction that it's going to. But in reality, if you have 4, 5, 6, 7 jobs in your life, or whether you start companies in my fourth, not everything's going to work. In fact, most of it's not going to work. But when it does, it's disruptive. There's in a way, it's almost like having a mindset of inevitability, right? If you do the work, you create at something, it will inevitably, statistically speaking, it will work. But you have to stay there for a long haul. And it's true about the growth innovation. So let me tell you a little bit about like the mindsets, okay? And I want to really get into not only at this at a professional enterprise level, but also at a personal level, because we're all individuals building our careers, our lives, and trying to find our purpose in all this. Is that how you think affects everything? It's not just the effort, it's not the skill, it's not the pedigree. Your mindset matters hugely, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So here's some of the big ones. So there's this concept we like to talk about. Is called TAM to TAP. And that is a massive shift from a total addressable marketplace view of the world, from the inside out, to a total addressable problem or need in the world. And what that does is it tells us that the answer is outside, not inside. It's no longer R&D, technology, or product in search of a problem, which is almost always fatal for a big company or a smart company. That's really the philosophy of let's make our idea work, which is totally fatal, as opposed to we need to start with the need in the world and build backwards. It needs to be true and on time. More importantly is we need to have a proprietary gift to solve it. What's in us? And this is an individual level in your job, or it's in this thing to actually go solve it, because you want to build something that's truly one of one. And so that really changes the orientation of the company. So for us to even hear this, so that's one lens, is outside in. The second lens is you got to break the addiction to being right. Cognitive bias destroys learning. There are some things where past precedence is a great predictor of future outcome. It's knowable and controllable. And when that controllable and unknowable start to happen, you start asking, we need to become question-driven leaders. So the question is, what questions do we ask? And so Venture Capital Way has rounds of financing that ask different questions, seed, A, B, C rounds. Those are non-linear rounds of financing. They replace stage gate financing. Sorry, toll gate financing, big companies, to stage gate, meaning a team can move forward and backwards across those stages as they learn. We could sell the dream, we could unsell. But it's like raising a child from a zygote to a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, to an ugly teenager. Every one of those growth has a different question. And so we're moving not from trying to get the metric, we're looking for signals that become indicators that become true metrics. And there's not many that work. We're going to see a lot of them, but they're the God metric. The one that drives all the growth is one we're looking for. Some other ones to do that, we got to expire data set, right? We got to be thinking about setting down paths and picking up new futures. We have to listen, we have to look to the customers to what they do, not what they say. So we can't use the big to bigger survey marketing things that made us good because the customers don't know. The behaviors in the world, this is what the pandemic has proven, is that the pandemics, we've gone through massive disruption and dislocation. So what does that even mean? That means that the behavior has changed. Whether they know it or not, the way they receive value, pay for value, exchange value, create value, they're behaving in ways they don't even understand and they can't tell you. The only thing that matters is what they do versus they say. It's about behaviors. Behaviors don't lie. So how do you get truth in that? You got to experiment. You validate. You don't launch, one big bet in a new problem world. You want to launch a large volume, like an MRI, that teaches you the patterns of how you're going to win. And whether you build, buy, partner, acquire, or quit, quite frankly, it'll teach you. So ultimately, these things are about what they call ambidextrous leadership, right? You can't just be an operator; you have to be a creator. You have to do both of those jobs and do them equally well. And so those are skill, and that's what we drive. So I still haven't gotten a model, but this is about how you think. And Jen, as we go into this, years ago I wrote this book called The Startup Playbook, where I interviewed some of the best entrepreneurs in the world about how they bet their life. Sarah Blakely, Robin Chase, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman wrote the foreword of the book, and they basically all said the same five lenses. That when you are looking through these five lenses in an idea or about yourself, it usually leads to extraordinary outcome. The ones I just described are more for enterprises, but as we get into the conversation today, I'm happy to share those as well.
Awesome. I'm like, there's so much coming out of this and so many different directions I want to go. I do want to, there was a question that came up in the chat and I wanted to ask about like buy-in, right? Like who needs to be kind of bought in to this kind of strategy and this kind of growth mindset in order for it to really work. And one of the questions that came into the chat, I think is related to that from Z about, like these small agile teams that are kind of emerging and bubbling up into the larger organizations. We see that with Mondelez has their snack futures department, Mars has their agile innovation team. So, maybe that's two questions wrapped up into one, but like who really needs to be bought in and how do you see the impact of those kind of those growth teams within organizations versus, the entire org?
Yeah. So my full disclosure, Mondelez is a partner of ours as well. In the past, Mars is, and I have friends over there who are at the top. And they're wonderful. So you need a model, you need a system. So it's great. So remember that Agile and these other teams are, if they're inside the big to bigger and they're sort of like moving without structure, they're kind of like special forces without an army or without a model in a way. And they're awesome, but the permission is really the issue. In fact, I've worked with organizations where the CEO had said, yes, go do this for my team. Like I did with Six Sigma. Everyone's walking around belts and they're certified, growth leaders, whatever it is. But when you go inside the organization, those teams are like, we don't have a team employee problem. It's like up top. And the reality is that is the biggest issue, is that they're thinking about markets and not problems and needs. So like, we work with P&G for the last 6 years, and they used to be obsessed for good reason with Unilever. When Dollar Shave Club happened and then Nelson Peltz showed up, those are big deals. But we started working with them, and about a year before that happened, and they were on offense. And so it was confidence because they were no longer obsessed with the competitors. They were thinking through the lens of, what are the 5 big trillion-dollar needs in the world, and how are our P&Ls organized to solve that, discovering or rediscovering, in this case, our proprietary gift. So let's talk about the permission real quick. We call this a growth OS, an operating system, because it's a model. And we use that to frame to say that if you don't have one, you need one, right? Because you have the pieces. Every organization has the pieces. They're not done. These companies are brilliant and competitive, but they're not integrated. And so what we do is we stand up with something called a growth board, who embodies and is coached with a growth mindset so they can do that non-consensus, high conviction investment portfolio. So they don't do 5 bets, they do 50 with a 93% failure rate in the first 12 to 18 months. And then that growth board is meeting semi-quarterly or quarterly. So if those agile teams are in the context of doing validation work, they go straight to the top. The guns and badges and the permission live with those leaders. And that's why at Bionic, we only work with organizations at a P&L enterprise level where we have the gun and badge, who are thinking through this mindset and in the portfolios. And so this is really important, is that we take this process called discovery, and then we reframe strategy around portfolios. Then we build this thing called validate. So we take those agile teams to do the upfront validating work. So we go from the 100 ideas to the 10, who then begin the agile journey, because the third component is the ability to build. And that's, that's really the seed rounds, the ABC rounds that actually make this work. The last piece is the growth ops piece, is that you have to be able to go fast. We need the functions, marketing, sales, finance, compliance, to be able to go quickly, because they're launching something that's most likely born to die. So we're not going to spend $1 million on legal when it's literally experiment. So once these things start to come together systematically, and they can start raising from that first dollar revenue to tens of millions, we have partners who are now in the billions of growth, it starts to really become a flywheel effect.
Yeah, that speed is so crucial. And I wanted to, dig into some of the risks, right? Because the bigger brands tend to have a harder time moving as quickly as they need to and iterating. And I love what you said, like it's 93% of these are bound to fail. So you gotta fail quickly, essentially. But like, what are the risks in terms of, you mentioned Dollar Shave Club with Unilever, like all these direct to consumer brands that are moving really quickly, all these small, startup brands that are in the CPG space or otherwise, that are just growing so rapidly. Like, what are the risks of not embodying these mindsets?
Well, I think the boogeyman around DTC is now, um, it's solving a customer need, a customer problem, right? And so it's less about the product. They're building products, but they're really building a channel, right? And so it's in the same way, it's really not about technology. Like it doesn't really matter if it's DTC or it's a passenger pigeon delivering the food, like whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, you can buy things through it in performance. I've run 2 performance marketing SaaSes in my past to pretty good scale, so I know this space pretty well. But when you back up, you think, what's the actual need? That's really where it begins. Like, what is the problem we're solving for? And so in that context, DTC, omni-channel, these tools are great ways to scale a brand, but they're really solving the need just fundamentally different. And there's new systems, new supply chain, new channel building, new activations that can be done to be able to build those businesses much faster, as opposed to classic analog and biological channels. But it doesn't mean those analog and biological channels are not valuable. In fact, they're actually massive. Like, in fact, you probably can't get to scale unless you be able to capture that behavior. So like and this has been true actually with a lot of DTC brands that are now, I think, on full on subscription, is that to get the reach they need to do, it needs to be across many different ways people buy to get to absolute scale. I mean, the big companies are operating in billions. And it's not to say there's not wholly owned. I know there's very interesting private equity companies going out and buying up micro brands on Amazon and otherwise, and they're going to build the future P&G. I totally get that. But I do think that if you set down the technology as a you know a linchpin to all this and start thinking about the need, there's lots of different ways to solve this. But ultimately, the behavior is really nice. So, like for example, the subscribe and save output of this moment in time is really like the autopilot of Tesla. The real threat is not the channel. It's about the fact that we can predict the need and then we can just turn it on. So you have to just do it for me. So I think that we originally thought about it as new products, but I don't think that. I think it's about a brand new habit, a new addiction, and this just happens to be the technology to provide it.
Yeah. This is a great opportunity. I'm trying to keep an eye on time because I could probably talk about this for a very long time, but I'm going to try to keep us on track here. We got about 15 minutes left. I'd love to spend the rest of the time talking about the customer. Like you've already kind of hinted at it a little bit. This is about consumer behavior, not what they're telling you. You also said something about expiring data sets, which I think is really interesting. And because we are in a world that consumer behavior changes at the drop of a hat, whether that's, some celebrity on Instagram posts about something and everybody has a different opinion all of a sudden, or a global pandemic happens and everyone's behaviors change. So like, how does the customer fit into all this? And what are some of the strategies that are important for you guys with this growth mindset in mind to understand consumer behavior as opposed to what they're telling you and build products that meet those needs.
You know, I'll give you three sort of ideas around this, but I'll give you a couple examples. So one is we need to move from customers philosophically to people. Um, and really, really listen. That's one. Second is that we have to not make things for them. We need to solve with them, shoulder to shoulder, in trust, um, and be with them. And then the third is really the TAM to tap, which we have to reframe from markets and behaviors and budgets to needs and problems. So people with needs philosophically is a really important mental model to move to, as opposed to how much entitlement do I have? How much share am I losing? Of what in this moment? Like if there's ever time, another opportunity to reset, like this is it. So I think once you can philosophically get there, so the question is, how do we learn those new truths? So one is if you want your company to tell you the truth to answer those questions, you need to lower the cost of failure, which means we need to run a lot more experiments and get truth in the room. So we have to be very good at running experiments with a lot less money because we're trying to surround the need and then let the need teach us what we need to become and what's our proprietary gift. So this is very philosophical, but in practice, I mean, I have partners who are solving the subscribe and save, disruption, right? So I will name one who is. I'm going to try to make this fictitious as best I can. So they sell clothing to kids, and they were trying to get sizing right. And so you go to a store, you put clothing on kids, they grow at different rates. I have three sons in particular. My house is littered with stuff that fits one generation and not the next in a matter of weeks because they're all different little people, right? Now they're huge. But and so if I want those kids to I want to move the purchase decision to them, then I need to create a model that can actually do that. So the question is, who is the customer? Is the parent the customer? Is the child the customer? So getting that right is really important. Well, it turns out that even if I think through a DTC lens, I'm like, I want a direct to consumer relationship with the blank in this home so I can make a lot of money. Wrong. What's the need? What's the problem? And so when you dig in, you realize what I'm trying to get right is sizing for the parent. That's the entire customer problem. So why I want to build a DTC business has nothing to do with the things that we think about. How do we make money, or how do we, solve a branding problem? A new brand, new revenue. It's about sizing, and so the entire business became about sizing. What's incredible about this is that as we determined how, go into this home and solve sizing, not the business sizing, we realized there was a massive carbon footprint in the home of like old clothes and shoes and all sorts of stuff. So we set up a big bag, and we sucked up all the competitor product of the house. And when we ground it up, we got the carbon credit. We built a painkiller for that parent, which is get rid of this stuff environmentally and socially responsible. Fantastic. In fact, so much they'll pay you to do it. Okay. So new business. Third is that the entire reason this business worked is because of socks. Because socks are incredibly high margin and that 99% of all customers bought them at checkout. So when you think about well, what business are we going to build? Oh, we got a direct to consumer t-shirt business. Actually, no, you're in the carbon footprint sizing sock business. So that's really about your mindset. That's what subscribe and save was to the problem. So when they entered and exit those businesses, the outcome of what they build and solve was so radically different. No one with an idea selling the organization up and down would ever survive even a first blush of the bias because of the lenses the team was looking through, which is through market and customer, as opposed to people with needs.
I think I can hear like a collective global amen from all the insights people in the room today, because that empathizing with the needs of people is exactly what the industry has been trying to move towards, away from customers, away from consumers. These are not just money makers like that, we just care about what flavors of whatever they like. These are real people with real needs. And so I like totally relate to that, and that empathy piece of like really take like moving with those people and understanding what's going on, not just in like how they're getting their kids dressed, but everything that surrounds that. What are they doing with the clothing that they don't need anymore? How what's their routine? What's their bedtime? Like that that like additional context and truly trying to understand those people as a whole is what really makes all the difference.
I've found in my very modest career that whenever I had a success, which only happened like two of the four companies of the exits we've had, like it's always because I've cared the most. And I think that's true with big companies too, which is like, what do you like, what do you deeply care about? Like, in whatever if you care more than anyone else in the world, which is what's required, you'll have success. But where you don't, you should just stop because it's not true. And everybody knows it's not true. And so, you don't have unlimited, you know, ability to care about everything, but you can care about some things that are the most important and win those because customers know, they know. And I think there's a truth underneath all this that matters a lot. And I think it's about us as leaders in all this is to have the courage and the conviction to drive that conversation, but to drive it at a mindset and skill level so that we can do it not as a one-off perishable outcome, but as a permanent refounding of the organization. Because that's in the beginning, that's how it started, right? You created something that was great. I don't care if it was 100 years ago, 50 years, 20 years, because it meant more to you, to that person in the world that you're trying to solve for. And you need to get back to that. That's where that truth lives.
100%. This is fantastic. I'm like loving this conversation. So, a lot of, I think what you just said, like people know if you're not really, quite caring about them. A lot of companies are talking now, it's in the last few years, it's been emerging this idea of people first innovation, right? And I can see some companies who say it and do it really well. And then there's a sort of disconnect where there are some companies who say it and probably want to get to that people first innovation space, but the people, the consumers, the customers, they know, it's not quite there. It's a little bit lip service. Um, so I guess like when are the people being brought into the process, and how and what can companies do to give people confidence that we do care about you and we are listening to you and we are providing you something that's going to solve your problems or meet your needs?
Well, I think customers want to be part of the solution. So if you're in a constant state of validating with them, experimenting, bringing them into your ecosystem, thinking them as not something to be exploited, but to something to be experimenting with, I think you can build a really high trust ecosystem and then basically tell stories about it, right? So, you know, that's an incredibly high trust, shoulder to shoulder problems in the world to solve. So if I were to think about growth right now, I'd be thinking about how do I build an ecosystem like the people, the world that I care about and their needs, and run experiments with them in a high trust way. So there's the consequences of failing are so low that they themselves always tell us the truth in their behaviors and their words, as opposed to us selling and marketing. I mean, one of the things I've learned at Bionic over the last 8 years is CEOs hate to be sold to, hate it. Like it just repulses them. They're just so it's so blown. So our entire mindset is not to been selling. I do a lot of keynotes and I speak all over the world now about this growth mindset and the system and the success we've had, but it's just sharing, right? It's just talking. It's sharing about stories, about sharing about mindset, sharing mechanics, the skill. And inevitably they're like, okay, like I could do this. I could see myself in this. And I think there's just something about sharing, not selling with customers in an ecosystem that you built that allows them to contribute and listen. And I think what they'll do is they'll teach you your proprietary gift. I think part of the whole refounding moment right now is that you need to rediscover that. Is like, why us? What is our impossible to replicate thing that makes us so trusted that we're going to solve this need for a customer forever? Because they're always going to come to us first and tell us the truth. I'll just share. I do want to touch on this, but this book I wrote called The Startup Playbook, which was about these 5 lenses. The 5 lenses, because I want you to think about your own personal life in all this conversation, which is how do you bet your life on a company or yourself? And so when you ask these entrepreneurs, like how to bet their life on an idea, they're really talking about themselves and they pass through these 5 lenses very consistently. The first one is proprietary gift. Why you? What is the thing that you have that or secret or insight about the world that no one else will have? And so the growth for yourself as an individual and the company begins with that question. Why us? What do we have that no one in the world has? And you may actually, we have companies that used to throw that proprietary gift away to like the garbage dump for penny for pound, literally. Because they're like, I'll get that job. But turns out that that proprietary gift they threw away was actually gold, right? It was waste that became wealth. So the proprietary gift is the first one. The second one is extreme focus. In a way, optionality is the enemy. The more things you do, the more mediocre you are. Like even in your career, like you forget well-rounded, find extreme skill. Same with companies, like you want to invalidate things to find the one, the extreme focus. The third is you got to build painkillers and not vitamins. Chronic lifelong malignant pain, not things that customers try and you put down. I remember once Elon told me, he goes, wishful thinking is the enemy. When you're crossing your fingers, hoping that a behavior changes, it's never going to change. Build painkillers. The last 2 lenses of the 5 are about execution. They're the 10x factor, which is if we were to asymmetrically invest in the one aspect of this business or this product or your own career that will become impossible to replicate, given enough time, the inevitability I was talking about, the 10,000 hours, what is the 10x factor? And the last thing is permanence. How can we stay in the life of the customer or person forever? What do we have to be with intention that creates that? So proprietary gift with extreme focus, that's a painkiller, that's 10 times better, that's permanent. You start to begin to think about what to bet your life on. And so these mindsets at the high level, I talked about the organization, and a model reveal, what am I investing in? How do I make this choice? And that really is about your personal career, your life, or it's about a business. But I think they're one and the same.
My gosh, fantastic. That is, I think, a really great place to leave it. We're kind of right on time. Those 5 lenses are, like really helpful. The third one you mentioned, I think it was the third about the painkiller. I was thinking, hope is not a strategy.
Right.
We say this a lot. Where's the data? Like, where's the information? But anyways, this has been a fantastic conversation. I cannot thank you enough for joining us. Our opening feature on day 1 of the Virtual Insight Summit. Thank you, David.
Very grateful. And I hope you guys have a great event together. And, I hope you guys look through a lens of abundance and not fear and choose growth. It's a great path going forward out of this moment in all of our lives.